Mickey Conway in Goodfellas is a hostess wife. She's the woman in the living room when Karen Hill first realizes she isn't married to a 9-to-5 guy. She's played by Julie Garfield, the daughter of John Garfield, one of the biggest stars in Hollywood history, and she's credited at number 21 in the cast, which puts her above most of the crew members who get killed in the third act. She throws the party, she delivers the gossip, she holds the room together, and that's it. That's all the most important mob film ever made decided to do with the wife of Jimmy Burke. The real Mickey Burke lived at 8148 102nd Road in South Ozone Park, Queens, for the better part of 4 decades. She raised children Jimmy named after outlaws, Frank James Burke, Jesse James Burke, and she watched those names become prophecies. Her daughter Catherine married into the Bonanno crime family. Her granddaughter's father was the son of a Genovese capo. With Diane, FBI dug up her basement in 2013. They found the remains of a man who'd been strangled with a dog chain in 1969. Meaning Mickey had lived above a body for 44 years without saying a word. She never gave an interview. She was never charged with a crime. She died in 2020 at 89 years old, and the only public record of her passing was a funeral home notice limiting attendance to 30 because of COVID. Here's a detail that tells you how deep this went. Catherine Burke demanded $100,000 for the use of the family name in the film. The producers refused. That's why the character is Jimmy Conway instead of Jimmy Burke, because the real family wanted payment for something Scorsese wanted to borrow, and nobody could make them give it up. The name change, the most basic biographical fact in the most famous mob movie ever made, exists because a woman you've never heard of said no. Goodfellas gave Karen Hill approximately 34 minutes of screen time, roughly 24% of the film. It made her the definitive mob wife in American cinema. Lorraine Bracco narrates entire stretches of the story. The audience sees life through Karen's eyes, the excitement, the fear, the gun in the towels, the spiral into paranoia. It's a performance and a structural choice that changed how crime films handle women. David Chase later cited it as the primary inspiration for Carmela Soprano, building an entire series around the idea that the wife's perspective could carry equal dramatic weight. But it came at a cost. The film built its portrait of the mob wife experience around the woman who eventually left the life and talked about it. The woman who stayed, who never spoke, who held the household together while Jimmy planned the largest cash robbery in American history, and then murdered most of the crew who helped him pull it off. That woman got a hostess party and a credited role that most viewers can't name. That's the version Scorsese told. And it happened for a specific reason. Pileggi's book was built entirely on Henry and Karen Hill's cooperation. Mickey Burke never sat down with anyone. Her maiden name has never appeared in any published source. No documentation exists about her ethnic background, her family of origin, her education, or how she met Jimmy Burke. The silence that protected her from prosecution also erased her from the story. The film didn't invent the erasure. It reproduced it, the same invisibility that the mob world imposed on its women. Hollywood transferred to celluloid without ever realizing it was doing the same thing. What follows is the version the silence kept hidden. Who Mickey Burke actually was, what she knew, what she lost, and why the one person in Jimmy's world who never broke is the one person history chose not to record. The house sat on a block of red brick row houses with garages below, one of those South Ozone Park streets that runs parallel to the Van Wyck Expressway and sits close enough to JFK Airport that you could hear the planes banking on approach. The neighborhood in the 1960s and 70s wasn't a place people thought of as organized crime territory the way they thought of Mulberry Street or Pleasant Avenue. But it was. John Gotti lived less than a mile away on 85th Street in Howard Beach. Paul Vario, the Lucchese capo who ran the airport rackets and the crew Jimmy reported to, operated out of a trailer behind a junkyard on Flatlands Avenue in East New York. Henry Hill lived nearby in Rockville Center. The houses were modest, the garages were useful. What happened inside them stayed inside them because the neighbors understood what kind of street they lived on without anyone having to explain it. Jimmy Burke married Frances Mickey Burke in 1962. He'd grown up in foster homes across Manhattan and Queens, bounced between institutions and abusive households, arrested for the first time at 13, already deep into hijacking and cargo theft by his late teens. He was half Irish and half Italian in a world where that distinction mattered. He could never be made. The Cosa Nostra's rules were clear on bloodline. So he operated as an associate under Lucchese's protection, earning and kicking up to Vario while running his own crew out of Robert's Lounge, a bar near the airport that served as the planning room for everything from truck hijackings to the Lufthansa job. Mickey married into all of it. According to Henry Hill's account in Pileggi's Wise Guy, an ex-boyfriend had been harassing Mickey before the wedding, calling her, circling the house, yelling at her in the street. On their wedding day, police found the ex-boyfriend's remains carefully cut into over a dozen pieces and tossed all over the inside of his car. It's the kind of story that tells you everything about who Jimmy Burke was and how he solved problems. But here's what nobody mentions when they repeat it. No independent police report, no contemporaneous news article, and no court record from 1962 has ever been cited to corroborate this story. It comes from Hill. Only Hill, and Hill, as we'll get to, had a complicated relationship with the truth. What is documented? The marriage, the children, and the house. Jimmy named his sons Frank James Burke and Jesse James Burke, outlaw names that were more than whimsy, though it would take 2 decades to find out exactly how much more. There was also Catherine, who would eventually hold the keys to everything Jimmy left behind, including a safe deposit box that still contained Lufthansa money decades after the heist. And there was a 4th child, Robin, whose parentage is less clear in the record. She may have been Mickey's daughter, or a stepdaughter, or a child from Jimmy's earlier years. The sources disagree and nobody in the family has ever clarified. While Mickey raised those children in the house on 102nd Road, Jimmy maintained a long-running affair with Phyllis DeSimone, Tommy DeSimone's teenage sister. According to Hill and multiple secondary accounts, the affair began around 1960 and ran for nearly 2 decades, concurrent with the marriage. Phyllis was reportedly 16 when it started. No source records Mickey's reaction, which is itself a piece of information. Either she didn't know, which seems unlikely given how small that world was and how close the families lived, or she knew and chose to stay. Both possibilities say something about the architecture of the life she was living. The same structure that gave her a home and a family and the protection of Jimmy's name also required her to absorb whatever came with it. The absences, the other women, the things that couldn't be discussed, and carry it without complaint. Jesse, the younger son, stuttered. Hill told Pileggi that Jimmy largely ignored the boy, leaving him to play in a basement filled with stolen toys. Merchandise from hijacked trucks at JFK that Jimmy brought home the way other men bring home groceries. The image is almost too perfect to trust, and maybe that's exactly right. Maybe Hill shaped it for Pileggi's ear. But if even a fraction of it is accurate, it tells you what the Burke household actually was. A place where the line between domestic life and criminal enterprise didn't exist. because there was no line. The same house, the same basement, the same man walking through the door every evening, sometimes carrying toys and sometimes carrying something else entirely. And the same woman holding it all in place, answering the phone, feeding the children, maintaining whatever version of normalcy was possible in a house that Jimmy Burke came home to. Mickey Burke was never charged with a crime. Not once. Across every investigation that touched Jimmy's world, the Lufthansa case, the KENRAC airport, corruption probe, the Boston College point-shaving prosecution, the Richard Eaton murder trial, the 2014 Vincent Asaro indictment, her name doesn't appear in a single filing. Not as a defendant, not as a co-conspirator, not even as an unindicted participant. Henry Hill's cooperation with the FBI led to more than 50 federal convictions and covered over 200 separate crimes spanning 2 decades. He apparently never implicated Mickey in any of them, but she wasn't absent from the machinery either. She was the house where the machinery lived. She was the kitchen where the crew ate while they planned. She was the living room where associates came and went at hours that had nothing to do with any legitimate business. She raised the children who grew up watching those men arrive and leave, who understood before they could articulate it that their father's work didn't have a name anyone was supposed to say out loud. And in the most critical weeks of the entire Lufthansa aftermath, the weeks that determined who lived and who died, she picked up the phone and did something that looked like friendship, but functioned like intelligence work. Here's a number that puts the Lufthansa aftermath in perspective. $5.875 million in cash and $875,000 in jewelry, taken from the Lufthansa cargo terminal at JFK on December 11, 1978, in 64 minutes by a crew of 11 men. It was the largest cash robbery in American history at the time. The take was supposed to flow upward, tribute to Vario, to the Lucchese hierarchy, percentages to the Bonanos who'd provided the inside man. Jimmy's share alone was enormous, but the crew couldn't hold it together. They were spending visibly, buying fur coats and Cadillacs, flashing cash in the same neighborhoods where the FBI was already asking questions. Exactly the kind of behavior that draws federal attention. Exactly the kind of behavior that gets people killed. The murders started almost immediately. Stax Edwards, shot 6 times in his apartment in December. Parnell Stax. Edwards had been given the job of disposing of the getaway van, and instead got high and left it parked on a street where it was found by police. That mistake cost him his life. Frenchie McMahon, found frozen in a refrigerated truck on a street in the Bronx. Joe Budamanri, shot and left in his car. Angelo Seppi and his girlfriend Joanna Lombardo, both shot in Seppi's apartment in July of 1984. Years after the heist, the cleanup still continuing. Teresa Ferrara, Tommy DeSimone's mistress, not just a bystander, but a woman who dealt cocaine and quaaludes through a mob-funded beauty salon and had reportedly become an FBI informant, dismembered and left scattered along the shores of Gravesend Bay in February of 1979. Martin Krugman, last seen alive on January 6, 1979. His body has never been found. The list continued for months and then years. The people closest to the money kept disappearing, and the people still alive understood what it meant. During this exact period, after Henry Hill's arrest on drug charges in 1980, while Jimmy was calculating whether Henry had become a liability too dangerous to leave breathing, Mickey Burke called Karen Hill every day. This isn't speculation. It comes from Karen herself, as told to Pelagian Wise Guy. Mickey kept asking when Henry was coming home. She kept probing. How was he? What was he doing? Was he talking to anyone? Karen understood what was happening. Mickey was calling for Jimmy. She was gathering information through the wives' social network at the precise moment when the wrong answer could have gotten Henry killed. That's the only documented instance of Mickey performing any role connected to the criminal operation. It wasn't a crime, calling another woman and asking about her husband isn't illegal under any statute, but it shows how the infrastructure worked. Mob wives functioned as a parallel communication system, invisible to wiretaps and surveillance, because there was nothing criminal in the content of the conversations. They passed information that couldn't travel through official channels, because official channels were being monitored. Mickey's daily phone calls to Karen were surveillance conducted through the language of friendship. How's Henry doing? When's he coming back? Is everything okay? And the stakes couldn't have been higher. The information she gathered was feeding directly into Jimmy's decision about whether to order a murder. Before I get to what happened to the Burke children, and what happened tells you everything about what that household actually produced, I'd be curious what you think. Did Mickey know what Jimmy was planning to do with the information she gathered, or was she just following instructions without asking what they were for? Let me know. The film shows the Lufthansa aftermath as a montage of murders, bodies in freezer trucks and dumpsters hanging from meat hooks, intercut with Jimmy smoking and staring and Karen narrating the unraveling. It's effective cinema. What the film doesn't show, because the film ends when Henry enters witness protection, is what life looked like inside the Burke house during the killing months. Not the dramatic moments, the ordinary ones, the mornings after, the dinners where everyone at the table knew that people they had eaten with the week before were in dumpsters and refrigerated trucks and shallow graves, and nobody said a word about it. And Mickey poured the coffee and cleared the plates and put the children to bed. Between December of 1978 and September of 1980, at least a dozen people connected to Jimmy Burke were murdered. Their wives knew. Their families knew. The women in the crew's social circle knew because they lived in the same neighborhoods and shopped at the same stores, and their husbands stopped coming home. One by one, the families around the Burke household shrank. The phone calls between wives that used to be social became something else, a way to confirm who was still alive, who had disappeared, whose husband hadn't come back last night. The social fabric didn't tear all at once. It thinned, and the women who remained, the ones whose husbands were doing the killing rather than getting killed, kept their composure and kept their silence, because the alternative was unthinkable. Mickey Burke continued answering the phone through all of it. She continued living in the house. She continued maintaining whatever domestic structure held the family together, while the circle around them contracted with each disappearance. The irony cuts both ways. The men in Jimmy's crew who couldn't keep their mouths shut died for it. Stax Edwards because he was careless. Krugman because he talked. Frenchie because he spent too visibly. The women who could keep silent, who were expected to keep silent as a condition of the life, survived. Mickey's silence wasn't just cultural loyalty or personal discipline. It was the operating principle that kept her alive in a world that killed people for talking. She didn't just maintain omerta. She was better at it than every man in the crew. If this is the kind of story that keeps you here, a subscribe means I keep finding them. Jimmy Burke named his sons after outlaws. The names turned out to be prophecies. Frank James Burke followed his father into the life before he was old enough to vote. According to Hill, and corroborated by later law enforcement accounts, Frank drove a backup vehicle during the Lufthansa heist itself, a teenager serving as part of the logistics for the biggest cash robbery in the country. By his early 20s, he was dealing heroin associated with the Gambino family, rather than the Lucchese crew his father had operated under. The jump from Lucchese orbit to Gambino territory suggests Frank was building his own path, or that the Gambino organization, through its connections to the drug trade, pulled him in. Lieutenant Remo Franceschini of the Queens District Attorney's Office described him as a budding member of the Gambino crime family. On May 18, 1987, Frank James Burke was shot dead by a drug dealer named Tito Ortiz outside the Suncrest Tavern on Liberty Avenue in East New York. He was approximately 27 years old, dead on a sidewalk in a neighborhood his father had operated in for decades. The outlaw name was fulfilled. Mickey buried her firstborn son. What that did to her, how she carried it, what she said to the people who came to the house, whether she blamed Jimmy's world or understood it as the only possible outcome of the world she'd helped maintain, none of that is recorded, because nobody asked. And Mickey didn't volunteer. Jimmy was already in prison by then, convicted in 1982 of fixing Boston College basketball games based on Hill's testimony, sentenced to 20 years. He couldn't attend his son's funeral. Whether Mickey told him the details or whether he learned them from a guard or a prison phone call, that isn't documented either. Another gap in a record made entirely of gaps. Catherine's path was different but led to the same gravity. She met Anthony Bruno Indelicato while visiting an inmate at Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary. Indelicato's father was Alphonse Sonny Red Indelicato, the Bonanno capo murdered in the 1981 internal war, the three capos hit that put Philip Rastelli and later Joe Massino in control of the family. Bruno himself had been convicted for the 1979 assassination of Carmine Galante, the Bonanno boss shot at point-blank range while eating lunch on the patio of Joe and Mary's Italian-American restaurant in Bushwick, a cigar still in his mouth. Catherine married Bruno at a federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana, in 1992. When he was released in 1998, Indelicato reportedly rose through the Bonanno ranks to become consigliere, the third highest position in the family. He was convicted again for a 2001 murder and sentenced to 20 years. Catherine didn't marry. She married into its command structure, and she managed the family's affairs with a discipline that, by all accounts, exceeded anything Jimmy had demonstrated. Former Bonanno capo Dominic Sical described the dynamic bluntly. Catherine was basically in control of everything: the safety deposit box, her mother Mickey, and the rest of the family's affairs. The phrasing is worth sitting with. Mickey isn't described as managing the family. She's described as being managed by her daughter. Whatever authority Mickey once held in that household, if she held any at all, had passed to Catherine, who held the keys to the safe deposit box where Lufthansa money still sat decades after the heist. The daughter had become the operator. The mother had become the person who needed looking after. A 27-year-old shot dead outside a bar on Liberty Avenue, named after an outlaw by a father who thought it was clever. I'd be curious, do you hold Mickey responsible for what the children became? Or was the outcome already written the day she decided to stay? Robin Burke, the fourth child, drove a school bus in Queens, a job so ordinary it reads like fiction against the backdrop of the family she came from. She held one of two keys to that same Lufthansa safe deposit box, meaning the proceeds from a $5.8 million heist moved not through the men who planned it or the crew who executed it, but through two women who'd grown up in the house where it was planned. Two daughters, two keys, the biggest cash robbery in American history. And by the time the money settled, it was in the hands of women the FBI had never looked at twice. Robin's daughter's father was Frank Perrone, son of Genovese capo Ciro Perrone, yet another marriage connecting the Burke bloodline to organized crime royalty. Count it. Lucchese through Jimmy's crew, Bonanno through Catherine's marriage to Indelicato, Gambino through Frank's associations, Genovese through Robin's child. 4 of the 5 families, touched by a single household in South Ozone Park. Jesse James Burke's fate is unrecorded. The stuttering boy who played in a basement full of stolen toys simply vanishes from the documented record after childhood. Nobody knows where he ended up. Nobody has ever published an account of what became of him. Of all the silences in this story, Jesse's might be the most complete. Not the silence of refusal, like Mickey's, but the silence of someone who simply disappeared from the narrative without anyone noticing he was gone. 35 years after the Lufthansa heist, the FBI came back to 102nd Road with jackhammers. In June of 2013, agents spent 3 days excavating the basement and backyard of the Burke house, the same house where Mickey had lived since the 1960s, the same house where the crew used to gather around the kitchen table, the same house where Jimmy came home to dinner, and where Jesse played with stolen toys in the basement. Reporters from DNA Info and the Queen's Chronicle, who covered the dig, noted an elderly couple and their daughter still living in the residence. The property records showed the home had been transferred to Catherine Burke's name. Beneath the basement floor, investigators found human remains. The FBI sent the material to the lab. Testing confirmed the remains belonged to Paul Katz, a mob-connected associate who disappeared in December of 1969. According to the later indictment of Vincent Asaro, the Bonanno, associate who'd helped plan the Lufthansa heist and who was finally charged in 2014. Katz had been strangled by Jimmy Burke and Asaro with a dog chain, then buried beneath the family home. The remains had been there for 44 years, through every holiday dinner, through every birthday party, through every argument and reconciliation and ordinary evening in that house. The bones of Paul Katz lay beneath the floor. Mickey lived in that house through all of it, through the Lufthansa planning, through the killing months, through Jimmy's arrest and conviction and imprisonment and death in 1996. She lived there while her son was murdered on a sidewalk 10 miles away, and while her daughter married a convicted killer in a federal prison visiting room. She lived there while her grandchildren played in the same rooms where associates of the Lucchese and Bonanno families had once sat discussing hijackings and airport theft in which members of the crew had become too unreliable to keep alive. She lived there while the FBI investigated and reinvestigated and came back yet again with shovels and ground-penetrating radar. And she lived there above the bones of Paul Katz the entire time, every day for more than 4 decades, walking across that basement floor to do laundry, to store holiday decorations, to retrieve whatever ordinary items a family keeps below the house where they live. Whether she knew is a question no source has ever answered. No journalist ever asked her. No prosecutor ever compelled her to respond. And she never offered. Nearly everything known about Mickey Burke flows from a single narrator, Henry Hill, filtered through Pileggi's journalism and Hill's own later books and media appearances. Hill was a valuable cooperator. His testimony put people in prison and broke open cases the FBI had chased for years. He was also a deeply unreliable narrator of his own life. He told one version of the Billy Bats body, disposal in Wise Guy, the body crushed in a car compactor in New Jersey, and contradicted himself on the Goodfellas DVD commentary, saying it was first buried under Robert's lounge. He claimed on Howard Stern's show in 2002 that he'd personally killed 3 people, a claim absent from both his FBI debriefings and from Wise Guy itself. His account of Tommy DeSimone assaulting Karen Hill, has been challenged by researchers who demonstrated that Desimone's prison release dates made the timeline Hill described impossible. He was expelled from witness protection in 1987 for continued criminal activity, substance abuse, and repeatedly revealing his own identity. He was arrested multiple times after that. He died in 2012 in a Los Angeles hospital, 69 years old, of cirrhosis and heart disease. Michael Franzese, the former Colombo capo who knew the Vario crew personally, put it simply, Henry Hill never looked so good as he did in that movie. He was a low-level guy, an associate, not nearly as close with Paul Vario as the movie depicted. The 2014 Asaro trials reinforced this, revealing Lufthansa participants Hill had never mentioned and operational details he'd apparently never known. What is independently corroborated about Mickey? The marriage, the children's names, the Ozone Park address, and the broad outlines of the family's trajectory. What rests solely on Hill? The wedding day dismemberment, the domestic dynamics, Mickey's personality, and the intelligence-gathering phone calls to Karen. The core facts check out. The texture, the detail that would let you understand who Mickey actually was as a human being, cannot be verified. And that absence isn't an accident. It's the direct consequence of the silence Mickey maintained for 89 years. Compare her to the women in that world who did speak or act. Karen Hill cooperated and got a film built around her perspective, but also got decades of instability, estrangement from her children, and a life spent moving between identities until she died in 2020, the same year as Mickey, at 75. Teresa Ferrara dealt drugs, opened a mob-funded beauty salon, became an informant, and was found dismembered on a beach at 31. Andrea Giovino, connected to Bonanno Captain Frank Lino, ran drug distribution in Brooklyn and was eventually caught on an FBI wiretap ordering violence to collect debts. She served time, wrote a memoir called Divorced from the Mob, and reinvented herself entirely. Each woman who broke the silence paid for it in a different currency. Mickey paid nothing because she never broke. The pattern repeats across every mob wife story from the era. The women who talked lost everything: their safety, their families, their names, their futures. The women who stayed silent kept their lives intact, but lost their stories. Mickey is the purest expression of that bargain. She traded her entire history, every thought she ever had, every choice she made, every moment of grief or fear or complicity or love, for the right to remain untouchable. The infrastructure of silence. It kept the operation running. It kept the family fed. It kept the law away from her door for nearly 6 decades. And it guaranteed that when the most important mob film ever made went looking for a woman to build its story around, it had to choose someone else, because Mickey Burke had made herself into someone who couldn't be found, even when she was standing right there in the room. The Goodfellas screenplay includes a stage direction that never made it to the screen in any meaningful way. It describes Jimmy and Mickey and Henry and Karen and Tommy and his girlfriend and the assorted children, all wearing party hats and blowing out the candles on 9-year-old Jesse James Burke's huge layer cake. Another direction reads simply, "Holds up a baby. Mickey is in tears. Those are..." the only glimpses of Mickey Burke's emotional life that exist in any record anywhere. A stage direction and a script based on a book based on the testimony of a man who couldn't always tell the truth from the version he preferred. Tears at a birthday party. That's it. That's everything. St. Charles Cemetery sits in East Farmingdale, Suffolk County, about 45 miles east of the house on 102nd Road. The headstone is shared. 3 names on one piece of granite. Francis J., 1959 to 1987, the firstborn, shot dead outside a bar at 27. James J., 1931 to 1996, died of lung and stomach cancer at Roswell Park Cancer Institute in Buffalo. Transferred there from Wendy Correctional Facility, 64 years old, never having spent a free day after his conviction. Francis L., 1931 to 2020, 89 years old, died during the pandemic in the same Ozone Park, neighborhood where she'd spent her entire adult life. Funeral limited to 30 people, no public statement, no obituary beyond the funeral home listing. Above the three names, a single line: St. Anthony, pray for us, the patron saint of lost things. There's nothing on the stone that tells you who these people were, nothing that explains why the first one died so young, or why the second one died behind bars, or what the third one knew about any of it. Just a family name, just the dates, just the silence she chose and kept and carried to the same ground where her murdered son and imprisoned husband were already waiting. The same silence that made her invisible to the film, to the record, and to every person who ever watched that hostess party scene and never once thought to ask who the woman in the living room actually was.